have a drill and a corn planter over here that I think has some no-till setup on it. Kitty had just asked me to spend a few minutes on some of the things we're thinking about in terms of setting up a planter. So first I'll say there's many people out here that have as much or more experience on this than me, so chime in with your thoughts. But we kind of have two options, right? We can buy a bunch of aftermarket pieces to try to beef up a planter we already have, and we know farms that have definitely successfully done that over the years. Or we can buy a planter that's designed for no-till, like this unit here. Generally with the drills, I think you're more in the boat of buying something that's really set up with no-till, where with a corn planter there's so much aftermarket stuff out there now that you can kind of rebuild from the toolbar up, right? So, and the way I think about it, with all the options we have today and all the innovations that are out there with especially corn planters, is tillage has just become a crutch for a planter that's not set up for the conditions you want to plant into. If we're set up properly, we can pretty much plant into anything these days. It's back to that simple thing of just getting the seed placement where we want it, and closing that furrow back up. So we can do that. We have the tools to do that, and even if we have to spend a bit of money to upgrade our planter to do that, if we weigh that against the cost of a couple extra tillage passes, we can save that money pretty quickly to upgrade the planter. So, but we get into no-till, we have more clumps, we have potentially a harder surface to break through, and so what do we need to do that? So with a lot of residue, want to think about removing some of that residue first. And I'm not sure what this corn planter has on it. I didn't come over and look at it, but we can run over there. Some people have gone to put in their fertilizer coulters as the first thing that goes through the field, because that actually they'll kind of cut that residue a little bit and actually help the cleaners, row cleaners, push it out of the way a little bit more if you have something cutting it up front. Then once we get the residue out of the way, our seed placement doesn't change at all. We still want that to get the depth, and then closing it back up becomes really important. And soil conditions are just as important or more important in no-till than they are in conventional tillage. So, again, unless we're in the mud with conventional tillage, that is, it doesn't take a lot from those press wheels to close that furrow back up, right? And when we're in cloddier situations, more residue and no-till, we really want to pay attention to getting that seed trench closed back up. Dave, we're going to hear from him later, but one thing I always remember him saying is you got to be patient and not feel like you're being lazy in the spring of the year when all your neighbors are out running over the fields with a couple different pieces of tillage equipment, and you're just sitting around, right? Because you're waiting for not that you're just sitting around, Dave, but you're waiting for those conditions to be right to go in. And you don't have to necessarily jump the gun and be out there a few weeks earlier, right? Because you have that many less passes over the field that you're doing. So patience is a huge key here, and we see it time and time again in both no-till and conventional tillage, where we rush it a little bit. We get that sidewall compaction. We don't get our rows to close up as good as we would like. And that really comes back to haunt us. There was something going around this spring. I think Mike shared it. It was the 10 Commandments of planting or something, and one of them was it's better to be a week late than a day early. And sometimes there's when we look at the way the crop can respond, putting it in the right environment at the beginning it can make up more ground than if we put it in a challenging environment on day one. It never seems to recover from that. So we can walk over and look at what's on the corn planter here. You know, you see a lot of farms experimenting with closing wheels and ending up with a scenario like this. That not everyone agrees with it, but it tends to be pretty common and work fairly well in terms of you know, serving a couple purposes. It can help break up if there is any sidewall compaction. It can help kind of break that up a little bit, and it can make sure we get that furrow closed in. There's not a lot else on here in terms of add-ons. It doesn't look like other seed firmers. You took it all off, so you know. So another thing that's become more common in any situation, but we hear about no-till as well, as seed firmers to really make sure that the seed's making good contact with the bottom of that trench. You know, just thinking about other things, weight becomes really important, right? So whether you're liquid or dry fertilizer, running your tanks or your fertilizer bins, you know, completely out and then refilling them, you can really make a big difference on how much weight you're carrying around, right? So, I mean, I realize there's a practicality to that we're not, you know, we can't be stopping and filling up every time they're half full, but we have to recognize that. And I think you do see that sometimes. The down pressure will change, especially if you don't have like an air system or something, and you're just relying on your natural down pressure. That as we run out of fertilizer, we see a difference in how deep we're getting with the seed. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. You know, continuing to, you know, run the planter level. It's not quite as big of a deal with these, but you know, again, if you start putting a whole bunch of extra stuff on the front of this, and you get that you get too much pressure on the front to try to, you know, if you have row cleaners on there or something and you're trying to dig out, you can end up, you know, you look at your leveling bars here and you'll end up with the planter not being level anymore because the front's either pushing down too much in, or it's not able to get in there. And so really paying attention to making sure the planter is still level when you start adding on all these extra pieces is definitely, you know, something we want to keep an eye out for anyways. But every time we add something to the planter, we're changing that. We're changing how it's going to level and how it's going to set in the ground. Obviously, you know, we're in an area where soil type changes really quickly within fields and from field to field, and that's going to change how that sets in the ground. So it's all the stuff we're doing anyways, but you know, oftentimes in no-till, it brings it up a notch in terms of importance of how we're gonna of paying attention to all those little things to making sure our seed placement is still where we want it to be. So that's you know, that was just a quick rundown of things that I had on my list. I know we'll hear from some of you guys this afternoon on what you're doing on your with your program and your planters.